Hello to everyone and welcome to today's event. My name is Tanner Swift and I'll be your host for this session. I'm excited to introduce some incredible speakers for you today, but before I hand the mic over to our presenters, we do have a few housekeeping items to cover about this presentation. Today's virtual event will be recorded and made available on demand after the live session. The playback will also be available via YouTube for rewatch as well. We'll provide you with some further details at the end of today's event. Also, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. During the session, if you have any questions for our presenters, you can submit those via Slido, where we will answer your questions live or during the Q&A portion of today's event. You'll also see some QR codes available on your screen throughout the event for you to access that Q&A, as well as answer some poll questions that we have lined up for you today. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our speakers for today, Mark Kerpeel and Christopher Bonanno, who are excited to discuss how to troubleshoot your applications using Cisco's observability tools. And we'll kick things off by first sending it over to Christopher. Christopher, right over to you.
Thank you, Tanner. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining again. Very excited to be here and go over our exciting new portfolio for observability using Splunk Observability. And let's go ahead and progress. Now, just before we start diving into it, just a quick temperature check. I want to see how you guys are feeling in terms of your own comfortability or confidence in monitoring your current applications. If you could use that Slido that was explained to you earlier, or this QR code here. Let me see kind of a round of what you guys are currently feeling, and then we'll kind of use that to tailor what we're going to be going into going forward. All right. So it's usually a mix coming in on that, and that's kind of what we're expecting. And at the same time, we're going to go just to cover all of our bases, make sure that people that are very confident versus the people that are scared of the future. We're going to go kind of cover all of our bases here. By first overviewing the Splunk observability. A lot of things have changed in the recent months and the last year. I'm sure you guys have been following it in the news as well. If you're a customer currently, I'm sure you are privy to the knowledge that Splunk and Cisco are now one. So in addition to the overview, we're also going to be going over the traditional application monitoring and troubleshooting with a demo there, as well as the more modern cloud native application monitoring and troubleshooting with a demo there as well. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A at the end. So let's start out with our first stop on today's agenda, the overview of Splunk observability. So now with the merger of Splunk and Cisco, more than ever, we are able to cover a large range of use cases and tune for true end-to-end visibility, a mission statement that every observability tool out there tries to go towards, but we are kind of set apart by the ability to actually pull it off. And now you can do this by looking at your networking, your APM, your infrastructure, your by looking at logs and all the other amazing capabilities as you see on the slide. But it can also be done in your classic in a data center, on-prem architecture, or maybe a hybrid where you have some things in cloud, some on-prem versus pure cloud monitoring. And now this is all being done with 4 major products, a part of the portfolio in Splunk Observability. Now you have, your traditional, things being covered under AppDynamics, your infra database, your more monolithic apps or hybrid apps, that have been more modernized, but still in the traditional sense. And then you have like SAP and things of that nature, all getting pumped into AppDynamics. And then You have the observability cloud, which is going to be more focused on the cloud native apps or more modern with cloud infra. And then you have the regular Splunk platform that we've all grown to love over the years. Even before they were joined together, it was still the best on the market. For Splunk, looking at the logs and analytics of after the case monitoring, and then we have a dashboard bringing it all together under the Splunk ITSI, and we'll be able to cover more of these things as we progress in here, and then we'll mix it up with some demo and questions. Keep you guys engaged. So first of all, this isn't something hidden or unknown by you, but just to, for sake of telling a good story, right? Why is it important that we monitor applications? Well, things changed. Largely in the 2000s, where you used to be able to just go into the store, and you still can, but now you have an option. You can either go into the store and go buy your clothes, or you can order it straight to your house if you know your size and there's a certain brand you like. You just go to their store, their digital storefront online, and you can just pick and choose. It's all e-commerce now. More and more, what we're seeing is the front door of a business. Revenue generating applications are the forefront of everything now. So if you're buying food, you're doing a claim for insurance, you're looking at an expense report, or say that it's something for work and you're keeping up on your sales. All of these things are largely managed and viewed by customers on some sort of a application or web service now. So before we go too far, I want to start reviewing the traditional applications, monitoring through AppDynamics and some of the new players involved with that. And we'll start from left to right. Now you have the end user monitoring those digital storefronts, like I mentioned before, and it's including everything from the browser real user monitoring, mobile, synthetics, IoT, the Internet of Things. All of those are being captured, being sent through the EUM agent, being sent to the back end where there's web services and multiple applications and services that are supporting the overall functionality of the whole application hierarchy. And then, it might go out to databases, file systems, and then you also have the ability to hook up secure apps so you can help avoid catastrophic failure like the Log4j crisis a few years back. Things like that. If you're able to have something tied in, looking at the code, which our agents already are doing, and then you pop in secure app, you also have the ability to be looking at and monitoring, dependencies and such of that nature. Now you also have logs being created with all of those things, and normally you would go into a separate platform to be looking at those things. Well, now we've tied AppDynamics and Splunk together so that it's a more seamless experience, less querying and manual labor on your end to set things up, and having a systematic approach of troubleshooting. And we'll go over that more in the demo, but just to get a good picture of how it all works together currently and where it's going. So just in case you're not as familiar with AppDynamics, but we are focusing on application performance monitoring, APM, some quick definitions will help you kind of solidify that understanding. Now, first of all, when I say traditional applications, this is what makes it traditional. You have a business application, and then you have multiple tiers, and usually those tiers are logical groupings of nodes that are usually the same instance of code handling the same kind of handoff, whether it's like an inventory service or something verifying the login, etc. All of that is all joined together logically, and you have this kind of hierarchy of a business application, and then you have multiple tiers within that application, and then you have multiple nodes within that tier, within each one of those tiers. And it's all logical groupings of, what they're doing, what their purpose is. And then what's traveling through all of that is a business transaction. The most critical transactions that are going through your application that if they're not working, like login or checkout or add to cart, things like that, things that are reliant on, or that your business is reliant on to work effectively, or you will see a dip in revenue. If a customer doesn't like the website, they won't buy it on your guys' platform, or something like that. And then you also have backend calls. It could be databases, it could be a CDN where it's pulling down a picture. All of those things, it all attributes to a user's experience and dealing with that digital storefront. And you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward and making sure that you're monitoring what directly affects your company's revenue, and by making sure that the customers are happy. So let's take another pause here and go over our next question. Now, before I jump into, kind of how they go and they blend, I just want to get a good feel of, how you guys are where you guys are currently situated with Cisco products. Are you guys currently using AppDynamics only, Splunk only, both, neither? You're not really sure? What describes you guys best? Please pop that in the Slido, and we will be able to kind of bridge that gap and start understanding, our customers as well, and where you guys are and where you guys can be. So now let's start jumping back into the Log Observer Connect portion. Now, I alluded to being able to go from AppDynamics into Splunk and looking at those logs. So now, how does this occur? What is the what changed? Well, as you can see, this is the newer version of the AppDynamics UI. It has a lot of it had a lot of revamp and modernization happen lately. It used to be, very, it's been around a long time and it looked the part. So now, to make it easier and more consistent with what you're used to or getting used to with Splunk, if you don't already have it, Splunk has been out in the market probably just as long. So the fact that, they are starting to blend and we're starting to need to unify your user flow or your experience in using it, or they're going to be a little more easier to traverse, and it's not going to feel like, there's just so many different tools. It's going to be more like one's an extension to the other and vice versa. Now, by doing the things like this, adding a button there that says view logs in Splunk, it's not going to just bring you to the login screen of Splunk. It's going to actually log in. It's going to start looking at the logs aggregated and associated with what you're looking at. So if you're zoomed into one of these tiers, a business transaction, or, depending on what you're in, it will bring you to the logs that are relative or related to what you're actually looking at. So you're not going to have to build these big, extravagant queries in addition to trying to search around in AppDynamics. It is a complement. It is a unified experience. It's just so much better, and I'm really excited to show it off to you guys. So now, without further ado, let me go ahead and jump into showing that to you. So here is the landing in the AppDynamics controller. We're all used to this. We come in here, we click on the application that we're looking at, and now say that we are starting to troubleshoot. We're noticing, issues going on with adding things to cart, and we want to start refining that. That is probably the most critical. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't say the application name. I'm going to go to the one that's not healthy, right? And follow the red. It's especially when we're trying to troubleshoot, right? And to give us a little bit more data and more ability to slice and dice and figure out what's going on with that add to cart functionality that we're getting alerts on. Let's go ahead and change it to 4 hours. All right. So definitely see that things are not healthy. But let's go ahead and start focusing in on what is most important for this application. And like I said earlier, before even going into the app, let's go ahead and check the add to cart. If this is going wrong, it is not going to look good for us. It is not going to, it's going to make it so that if somebody's trying to purchase, they have intent to purchase. they have intent to spend money with your company. You don't want them to be thwarted for any reason. You don't want them to have any sort of obstruction or hindrance. So it's a very important and very critical situation to make sure you're observing. And this business transaction, you can't find a more important one on this. Maybe logging in it would be the only other one that's on equal level. But now let's go ahead and start going into one of these snapshots. Now, I went into the business transaction. I guess I should tell you what I'm doing here. And I found the add to cart. And then when I went in there, it'll bring you to a dashboard all aggregated to that one business transaction. And then I'm going to go into the transaction snapshots. And now this brings me to all of the transaction snapshots that have been taken, whether good or bad. So what I'm focusing on, though, is what's going wrong, what's going bad, what are things that I probably need to fix. And now, if you're not as familiar with AppDynamics, you're going to want to try to find a full call graph, something that has a blue little file here. You can any of these options here along the top. You can easily sort just like you would an Excel sheet. I'm going to go for the one that has the red and one that has a full call graph, and then I'm going to double click into that. And now we see an error in here, and it tells you there's a JDBC exception, and it's something to do with the when it's creating the query, but something's not quite going right, and you don't necessarily have the full explanation. At this point, we can easily hand off to a DBA, and they can go in there, or you can go into another option or another way of finding out more about what's going on here, and the calls associated. But what if we can just easily figure out what's going on by looking at the logs? Since before 8 p.m. and everything else, logs have always been a tried and true way of monitoring your application and making sure that things are performing correctly. So now when we come in here, we can see not only that things were failing because some sort of ambiguous exception, we can actually see that it failed to complete the request due to it's not able to execute that statement. And it's not just giving us, that ambiguous thing. It's saying that it's not, there's something wrong with the building of that query. And this is leading you right into, what kind of solution you can find by going back and talking to the developers and saying, hey, we might need to, check out this line of code and figure out, where it is creating that query and find out what wrong value that is. And now it even tells you, specifically that there's the cart items is specifically what's the issue. And you don't have to go, talking to 10 different people before you actually get into this or build an extravagant query that somewhat matches what you're doing on the APM side of things. You can just immediately jump into it and you won't have to do as much digging. So, and you saw how easy that was, right? I went straight from AppDynamics right over to, and it built the query for me. I didn't have to mess around with doing anything really. And then from here, if I want, I can go into, changing the the visualizations and doing some analytic digging myself, just in Splunk, but at least it's already done, and it's doing it within the the time frame selected in AppDynamics as well. It aggregates to what was pertinent. We were looking at that business transaction. We were looking at the snapshots and errors related to what was happening in that transaction snapshot. And now we got to go right into the Splunk and kind of complete that full picture looking at the logs. So now before I hand off to my good friend and colleague Mark, I just want to recap real quick. So App Dynamics and Splunk are together. It's all one big happy family. and Mark's going to do a better job of explaining how they work well together and everything. But at the same time, having the power of monitoring both your traditional applications from an APM side and being able to easily get into the logs, and then having that single source of truth through Splunk portfolio or observability platform. Having everything all unified is just really going to simplify that tool sprawl that people feel, and where every team has a different tool and they're all trying to argue with what they see in across different tools. And well, imagine you have a tool that kind of can do everything, and that is largely what Cisco has put together by getting Splunk, AppDynamics, and the multiple other products that they have, all with under the same toolbox or portfolio. So without further ado, I will go ahead and hand off to Mark.
Cool. Thank you, Chris, for the introduction and the amazing presentation. Now we've covered troubleshooting on a traditional application, but how can we do the same on a cloud-native application? And before we go into it, I did want to see what everyone's environment looks like right now. So I'm going to ask you what best describes your current environment, whether it be traditional, hybrid, or cloud native. I'll give everyone a few seconds here to answer. Well, as a lot of you know, the modern application is growing more and more complex. Cloud has become the new data center, internet has become the new network, and SaaS has become the new app stack. Not only that, but we have to deal with so many other things, such as multiple cloud providers and services, application languages, containerized environments, microservice architectures. And not only has our application gotten more complex, but our users more than ever are demanding higher standards of performance. All of this provides quite a challenge when it comes to monitoring. Thankfully, we're keeping up with the times by offering an observability platform nicknamed Splunk Observability Cloud that is built to handle these complex cloud-native environments and help ensure proper performance and availability of your applications to your users to not only make them happy, but also to make your business more successful and ultimately more profitable. And to achieve this level of evolution, Splunk Observability Cloud has harnessed the power of open telemetry. And before we go too far with talking about the observability platform, let's briefly catch you up on what OpenTelemetry is, as it's a new standard of the observability space. So what is it? OpenTelemetry, OTel for short, is a vendor-neutral open source standard way to collect an application's telemetry data from their infrastructure and services. And it's managed by the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Now, OTel is their second biggest project, behind the biggest project that you've all heard of, Kubernetes. And we understand that Kubernetes has become more than just successful. We at Cisco believe that OTel is the future when it comes to collecting telemetry data, so much so that we are the #1 contributor to the project. And our belief comes from how we've seen the project's ability to fix the industry issue of collecting data from these complex cloud-native applications. Now, Splunk's Observability Cloud platform is built around ingesting OpenTelemetry, and it even has its own version of the OpenTelemetry collector and agent, which is what it's used to collect your application's monitoring data. Some of the benefits of using Splunk's version versus the open source is that it's updated more frequently and has advanced capabilities specifically for Splunk. Using the diagram, we can show you how this agent and collector look for an instrumentation on your cloud-native application. The infrastructure and backend services are instrumented using the agent, which sends data to our collector, where it can then be processed and sent to our backends of both Splunk Cloud Platform and Splunk Observability Cloud. And for those of you who are new to OpenTelemetry, a cool thing we can do is process our telemetry data, as shown on the slide, without touching the application level. Now, the changes in what needs to be monitored by the cloud-native architecture, including container infrastructure or microservices, have thankfully also been accompanied by the improvements in instrumentation. Where 15 or 20 years ago, we used to have logs, now we have metrics, traces, and other emerging forms of more structured data. And so the Splunk approach, this evolution of the problem and solution space, is the same as it's always been, by thinking about the data and the platform. Splunk's strengths have always been in the idea that you can bring in a common set of event data into a powerful and scalable analytic platform and use it for a variety of mission-critical use cases. And where this event data is used primarily in logs, now we have platforms that are first class for metrics and traces. And those performance insights start with monitoring at the infrastructure level. With multi-cloud and containerized environments, we can't do that same monitoring that we've done in the past with traditional VMs and servers. Splunk Observability Cloud allows for the proper monitoring of these complex infrastructures, all while allowing it to be viewed on one platform and doing correlation between the infrastructure and the application performance side to give us true end-to-end monitoring. And speaking of application performance, Splunk Observability Cloud provides full transactional analysis of every trace for our services in context with every metric, time series, and log event data to scope and isolate issues faster with more context. In your cloud-native environments, Splunk APM identifies slowness, errors, and anomalies in real time across unsampled distributed traces, databases, and resources with code-level visibility. And teams can now move faster with AI-directed troubleshooting to pinpoint where problems might impact services and the customers the most. Now, we touched on this with the traditional application monitoring, but when aren't logs useful to troubleshoot? Splunk Log Observer Connect is an integration free to existing Splunk platform and Splunk Observability Cloud customers. And this integration allows engineer and IT teams to seamlessly access Splunk Cloud and enterprise logging capabilities within an easy-to-use troubleshooting-oriented low-code or no-code experience. Teams can easily correlate their logs with real-time metrics and traces in a context troubleshooting and faster root cause analysis. And now existing Splunk customers don't have to deal with a broken toolchain and troubleshooting workflows since all their data is readily available for all their users. Now to show this all off, I'm going to do a demo. And in this demo, I'm going to do this in the eyes of an SRE engineer. As a former SRE engineer and a customer of Cisco, I wanted to show kind of a workflow that I would follow. Not sharing my screen. Now, the first thing I do as an SRE engineer is I want to go into my APM side. I want to see on this APM's homepage, we're able to see all our workflows, services, and we're able to do some troubleshooting tools such as service map, tag spotlight, traces, database query performance, and always on profiling, which is a memory profiling tool for Java applications. Now I'm looking through here, trying to find some issues. And like Chris said, I want to follow the red. So we see that our business workflow, and business workflows, if you're not familiar with them, business workflows are business critical functionalities of your application. They're basically just a way to group a bunch of services that work together by business function to give them context. And this helps with the what of problem solving. The what's very important, so we understand what's going on and what's being impacted. And the what here is that front end cart checkout, and this is an e-commerce application, just like we did on App Dynamics. That front end cart checkout is having an issue, and we see 9 critical alerts. So we're going to click into it and see what's going on. When we do, we get that service map, which I briefly talked about. Now, this service map is a grouping of all our services that are related to this business workflow, and then the calls between them. And we see on the right, we get specific metrics related to this. So we get the workflow requests and errors, error sources, workflow duration, and latency, as well as we could dive into some traces related to it, database query performance, and tag spotlight. And I'm going to do what Chris said before and follow the red. So we see that this is again that what. So we see that our front end service is having an issue, our checkout service is having an issue, and our payment service is having an issue. And we see that our payment service has this larger than the other kind of red circle, which indicates that it's probably the root cause of the issue. So I'm going to click into it. And again, this is updated now. It's only specific to payment services. And when we click into these, it's only related to services. We also get this new thing called dependencies. And in dependencies, we can see both the outgoing and incoming services to this service and see what's being affected, again, adding to that what of our problem solving. Now, another thing we can do here is look at the infrastructure and see if we're having any issues on that. So if I open this EC2, we can see if we're having any problems with this EC2. Now you see that we might be hitting a limit with CPU utilization. We don't see any memory issues. We're not seeing anything too crazy with the network. And overall, I'm not seeing anything that quite stands out as being the issue, but it's good to note what we've seen here as we keep troubleshooting. So I'm going to go back into APM and go back into workflow. And the next thing I want to do is look at its traces and see if we see anything there. Now, while this loads, for those of you who don't know, a trace is made up of multiple spans, and those spans are individual calls to your backend services, and the trace maps all those spans together into one flow that a user would go through. And each of those spans will have metadata that we're going to show in a second here, hoping this loads in time. This does take a little bit of time sometimes. If this is taking too long, I might switch to the next portion, but I'll let you know. Oh, there we go. I'm going to share this traps. So this is the trace ID. We see that we have this trace in a waterfall view of all our spans. These are the individual calls. We see that we can filter these spans by the error and even the root cause. So there's a machine learning model that tries to find the root cause of this and the spans that are related to root cause. If we click on one of these spans, we get some metadata and we can start looking at the what again, right? So we get some indications on what's going on. We get our error message, which is this invalid request. We see that it's a status code of 401. And we can see the pod IDs. We can see the environment, the host name, right? We get more details on what's going on here to help identify our issue and get to related teams. So let's say if it is a platform issue, we can reach out to our cloud platform team and help them help them look into investigating what's going on. But now back to our services. So we're going to go back to that service map. I'm going to go into workflows. We're going to go into that checkout. I'm going to click on this. And the next thing I want to do is this tag spotlight. So for those of you who don't know, tags are just things you can add in OpenTelemetry that kind of give indications on the span itself of metadata. And we looked at some of that metadata before on the previous one. And this tag spotlight breaks down these metadata tags to see if a specific tag is causing an issue. And again, add to that context of what's actually going on here. And I'm going to give everyone a few seconds to look at this tag spotlight and see if they can see what the issue is. It's pretty clear when you actually see it. Now, those of you with a keen eye might have noticed, but this version tag, 350.10, has a 100% error rate for every request, right? Versus this 350.9 has a 0 error rate. So now we've done quite a bit on the what is going on here, right? So we know what's being affected from a business standpoint. It's a checkout service. So we know what our users are having issues with is that checkout service. We know specifically which services are being affected. We talked about the payment, the checkout, and now we're looking at the what again, and we're seeing that the 350.10 version that we probably just deployed yesterday has a 100% error rate. Now let's use Splunk Log Observer Connect to figure out what this issue is coming from. And then once our logs go, let's click on some of the error ones and see what's going on. So we see we're getting this message of failed payment process through Buttercup payments, invalid API token. Let's click on a few more to see if this is 100% right. So we're seeing it again and again. And now we have the full idea of what's going on here, right? We put an invalid token in this 350.10 version. So we can tell either as an SRE engineer, if I had the permissions, I would update it and then release a new version. or contact the engineering team more than likely and have them update it, and then release a new version. And then we can monitor that new version using the tag spotlight and see if that fixed the issue. And an even cooler way to break it down from that tag perspective as we're monitoring the new version is we click on that payment services and we can break it down by the tag version, and we see that split. So we see that 350.10 has 100% error rate, 350.9 has none. Let's say we released a 350.11 that fixed that API token. We can then monitor it and see what our error rates are and see that we're not getting that latency or that error anymore. Now I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. Now we've covered our Splunk observability tools and how to use them to give you the best monitoring capabilities on your application. But as conclusion, I really want to reiterate that our products are not here to compete between each other. We saw AppDynamics, we saw Splunk, we saw Ollie, but they work together to meet our vision of better together future. And we want to use the four tools at what they're best at. So we have AppDynamics, which covers your traditional applications, SAP environments, and hybrid applications for performance monitoring. We have Ollie, which focuses on the monitoring of performance of your cloud native applications. We have Splunk Core, which is used for analyzing your logs, metrics, and events. And then finally, we have ITSI. And ITSI is a premium analytics solution for teams that manage and support digital services. It takes data from multiple tools, including AppDynamics, Splunk Platform, and Splunk Observability Cloud. And then it applies machine learning to our data for 360 service monitoring, predictive analysis, and streamlined incident management. This helps reduce noise and give you actionable events, right? That's all we want as SRE engineers, as engineers in general, is every time we get an alert, we have something that's actionable that we can fix. And that only improves the user experience, it only improves our businesses, and ultimately it impacts revenue. So that's what we really work here for. Now that's it for the material for today's session, and I know we've covered quite a bit, so I did want to open this up to a Q&A that would be run by me and Chris. So please submit those questions using Slido.
Thank you, Christopher and Mark. Really incredible job. Thank you so much for the presentation and the demo. As Mark just mentioned, we are to the Q&A portion of today's event. So we'll take some time for your questions now. You can submit those through Slido. I do want to take a moment, Mark and Chris, to go over some of the results of these poll questions real quick first, if you guys don't mind.
Sure.
All right. Let's do it. We start with the first poll question, and these polls are still available for you to vote on as well if you haven't done so already. Really appreciate you joining and your participation today. Our first poll question was, how confident do you feel in your ability to monitor your application? About half, 50% at not sure, 25% confident, and 25% very confident. Rolling through to poll question 2, are you currently using AppDynamics and or Splunk? 50% at both, 25% at neither, and split at 13% is Splunk only and AppDynamics only. And then our most recent poll question, what best describes your current environment? Also leading the way is hybrid at 50%, followed by cloud native at 38%, and traditional at 13%.
Okay. Well, just to add on that, hopefully for those of you who are not sure, hopefully you learned a little bit more today. Maybe you're considering our tools now or just how to use the tools. I don't know, Chris, if you want to add anything onto the results.
Yeah, no, I mean, very, very much complimenting to what Mark just said. You know, the more you know, especially if you have AppDynamics and Splunk already, and you're thinking, they're not connected. Start getting those connected. Check out we have YouTube videos on how to do it, or you can connect with your account teams, and we can start helping you familiarize with those better. And then, if you're really not sure, and wanting to start getting more engaged, start driving those questions. Monitoring your storefront is going to be critical for your business, the company's revenue. And if you're in any sort of support role, getting ahead of the curve is always going to be better than waiting until 3 o'clock in the morning to get a phone call and woken up and so definitely try to try to get ahead of things. No, that's about it. That's all I had, but those were very interesting results.
Thank you so much. Let's definitely get to some questions here. Have one at the moment that just came in from Ahmed. He asks, do I need to have a manager of managers application when using AppDynamics or Splunk? And he means like applications like OpenText OBM or IBM What's on AI Ops.
Got you. And Chris, you can speak to this a little as well, but applications are more so in the sense of a functionality of your company, right? So you have things like, if you're talking about, say Amazon, you have an e-commerce portion of Amazon that handles the searching of items, checking out items, logging in that user, or doing payments. Versus, I know Amazon just dropped a kind of food delivery service. That food delivery service would almost be another application. So it's more so you're kind of splitting it by a business functionality and less of the actual application layer level sometimes. And it is organization to organization. As someone who works with a lot of customers, how you split an application is very dependent on what you do as an organization and how your teams are structured around that organization. And if you ever have any questions, I mean, just always feel free to reach out to us. A lot of that is just kind of working through and problem solving for your specific environment.
And also, just to add on to that, being entity based, it gives you a lot more flexibility of, say that you have a group of services that are, not just dedicated to one application anymore. So having that flexibility of monitoring, not only what is considered to be one application, in the traditional sense, where if you're, combining the tools, you're looking at your hybrid cloud, you're able to kind of get a good idea of, how those services are affecting. Maybe you're looking at one application's view, even if it's using a different stack's services. That's getting more and more common now with microservices, where there's kind of like a dedicated backend for all apps, kind of a thing, and within and then also the built-in tools for all of the cloud providers. They all have their own flavor. You can tap into that, so you can kind of get a good understanding from both, from the almost like a hypervisor view or the cloud providers, what they're seeing as well, into the application, and then everything that they're touching as an entity, not necessarily a strict hierarchy of, this is assigned to this is only assigned to this. It still happens because, you still need dedicated resources sometimes, and then, different scalability. But yeah, it's very open and flexible nowadays. And then, just to complement what Mark was already saying of, you want to base it off of how you guys are using it, not just based on, what technology or what platform you're on.
No, thank you both for diving into that. Really, really appreciate it. That looks like that is our only question at the moment. Just as a reminder for our attendees, all of the resources and the replay today's event will be available at your disposal. If you registered for this event, you'll receive a follow-up email with all those resources and where you can watch today's recording. The recording will also be available on YouTube and the Cisco Learning Network. Another question just came in here. Does AppD or Splunk support today telco apps like 5G core cloud native functions?
I'm not sure off the top of the head. I know Splunk is, especially the observability cloud, is ever expanding on its list. The integrations page is honestly almost getting too long now. You got to search, you got to really dig through to find some things. But that's just the ever expanding cloud native application space. It just keeps growing and growing. So the one thing I'll say on that is OpenTelemetry also because we support it, makes it a lot more flexible to implement everything. So the first thing I would check if we don't have the integration right now is seeing if there's an open telemetry standard of doing it, and then implement it from that stand and send the signals through. But if we don't currently support it, I'm sure it's on the roadmap.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, real quick, just to add into that, kind of like what Mark was just saying about the open telemetry. If there's metrics that can be uncovered with open telemetry, and most, that's kind of the new industry standard, right? And it's vendor neutral. So I'm not necessarily sure about specific to telco, I'm not exactly sure of the technology specifically, but with that flexibility of open telemetry, and that's largely why we have such an awesome platform, and why it's so vast, and it's it's very adaptable, because it can be run either on things in the code or outside of the code, watching things almost like a proxy. So you can really kind of get a context, or you can start understanding how the flow of things, even if it's not necessarily inherent to that technology in a lot of cases. So we'll definitely be able to get more into that later on. And like Mark said, if it's not something we're doing now, I'm sure it's going to be on the roadmap, because we're pushing the evolution of our product more and more every day. So it's exciting, and thanks for that question.
No, thank you both. As we do wind down here, that looks like it does it for our questions at the moment. Mark, I want to kick it right back to you just for a moment. Is there any last words or any comments you'd like to leave for our attendees before we wrap up?
No, we're going to follow up with some resources on today's subject. Please check out, I'm going to do a shameless plug of we have a specific YouTube channel from customer success to help you on some issues. Please feel free to use it. It really helps. We help walk you through and give you some best practices while implementing AppDynamics and Splunk, hopefully soon. And other than that, I hope you enjoy today's sessions. Always feel free to reach out to us. Chris, do you want to go?
No, I think you captured it very well. This was a lot of fun, and we were very interested in engaging with our customers and showing off, the direction that we're going, not only as a company and a product, but being able to have more solutions in place, all in one, and working together with our customers to make sure that we're an industry leading tool or portfolio of tools. And hopefully today you see that vision, and if you're not already feeling comfortable with where you guys are, maybe you guys have something to consider. And then at the same time, we're here for you if you ever need. If you guys have a Cisco account, representative or liaison or customer success, feel free to engage the customer success engineers, or customer success specialists, were termed. And we can jump in, and things like what we went over today or what are on the YouTube. We can also jump in and help a little bit as well. So, and teach you how to fish in the vast ocean of observability. So thanks all for joining, and that's all for me.
Great. Thank you once again to Christopher, Mark, and the whole team for bringing your knowledge to the Cisco community today. If you do have a additional question for our presenters, we'll keep that Q&A portion on Slido open for a couple more minutes. There's also now a post-event survey live on Slido. If you could please provide your responses there as well, that would be greatly appreciated. For even more tutorials, demonstrations, and future webinars, please visit the Cisco Learning Network. You can also follow up with any further questions, view resources from today's event and its recording through our post-webinar discussion thread. You can also use that QR code in the bottom right of your screen to sign up for more info. Once again, we thank everybody for joining us today, and we will see you next time on the Cisco Learning Network.